Once again, just welcome to everyone joining this very interesting presentation from our side. At least we truly hope that you will find it insightful on what the analysis we have performed on our side. So today we hold a joint ENTSO-E and ENTSO-G public webinar on the gas and electricity winter outlooks for the coming winter. And it's my pleasure to introduce Kasper Jeromsky, Deputy Director in System Development Department of ENTSO-G, who will present the gas part of the presentation today. And then from ENTSO-E side, we have Simon Art, a convener of Working Group Seasonal Outlooks, presenting electricity parts in today's presentation. And of course, it's my pleasure. My name is Lukas Galdikas, just to moderate and guide you through today's presentation, and hopefully have a quite fruitful interactions with you today as well. So without further ado, I proceed further on, and I would would like just to set the housekeeping rules for today. So today, all the questions, whichever you would like to raise, we welcome them on Slido platform. You can see here a connection code throughout the slides. You will find it also somewhere. It should be typically on the bottom left corner, Slido code to connect to the meeting, as well as the QR code if it's more convenient for you to scan it, so you can connect there and raise your questions over there. That means also that we won't use a Teams webinar chat, or we won't check if there are any hands raised to get your questions. So we want to really go through all the interactions with Slido. So we truly just appreciate you raising your questions over there. Of course, we would be very happy if you could indicate your name and the company when you post your questions, if that's possible. Otherwise, of course, you are also welcome to keep anonymity yourself. So the proceedings of this public webinar will go as follows: that we first will present the content of this public webinar, and then at the end we will tackle all the questions which you will share with us. In the following slide, I think that we have just a bit more guidance on how to connect. Once again, you just can go on, if you're on the computer, you can go to slide.do and enter the event code there, and you should be straight connected to this Q&A platform. Or otherwise, you can also use the link which actually was just shared in Teams in the chat, if that's actually also more convenient for you. And then if I proceed on, before really setting the and giving the floor to the presentations, I would like just to lay out the agenda. So we'll start with a short introduction by myself, and then I will hand it over to Simon R. to present the electricity winter outlook, which we actually have just published today around 11 o'clock. So we are quite happy, and hopefully this presentation will also encourage you to open the document and read for further insights in there. But after this presentation on the electricity winter outlook, we'll give the floor to Kasper, who will present the gas winter supply outlook findings, which were published a little bit before, if I'm not mistaken, around October, and it's a possibility that you may have had a chance already to take a look at this and read it. But in case you didn't, please feel free, welcome, and encourage actually to open that document with very interesting insights on the prospects for the coming winter in gas system. And once we will finish with this part, as promised, we'll proceed to the Q&A session, and we would try to answer all the questions which you would share with us, or if it would run out of time, or we would be quite happy to get in touch with you after this webinar, as long as, of course, you share the details, your personal contacts when you raise the question. And last but not least, of course, we will just close this presentation and try to summarize it. So a very quick, just one slide on the introduction, just setting up what is the purpose on the seasonal outlooks. So first of all, it assesses adequacy situation to prevent and mitigate risks or to the security of supply during the winter period. So so this is just one of the first purpose. A second point is also that we are very eager to share our results with everyone and inform all interested parties about adequacy situation in Europe. So it's not only to assess that we would know, it's also about informing everyone. And last but not least, it also enables, by getting this kind of content, to have the information to share between ourselves, so between ENTSO-E and ENTSO-G, but even beyond our organizations, with other relevant parties as well. But one of the key stakeholders we have actually are you, the people joining this public webinar, having the interest in our results and raising the questions throughout the presentation. So with this slide, I think that I summarized the introduction of this public webinar, and I would suggest to proceed to the electricity winter outlook. And Simon, if you can speak and unmute yourself, I would be very happy to hand over it to you.
Thank you very much, Lucas. Can you quickly confirm that you can hear me well with the sound here?
Yes, everything.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Simon Art. I'm working for Swissgrid, for the Swiss TSO, and I have the role within ENTSO-E of the convener of working group Seasonal Outlook ENTSO-E since this year. I took that over from Cindy Bastiansen. And now I will be presenting the input assumptions and the results of the seasonal outlook. Yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. So quickly talking about the scope, we did look at the reference scenario based on TSO's best assumptions for the coming winter. In terms of demand, generation, and also grid capacity. And additionally, we did look at an energy saving scenario. And for this energy saving scenarios, we basically changed demand, and we scaled it according to the outcomes of a survey we conducted based on the reference scenario. I will go a little bit deeper into this survey on the next slide. And what we did for these two scenarios is the classical adequacy assessments or simulations based on climate years and unplanned outages. And additionally, we performed a critical gas volume analysis. Some of you, or maybe most of you, may already know this from last winter. It was developed last winter. And the methodology for this critical gas volume analysis is pretty much is the same as performed in the winter 22-23. In terms of special considerations, there were no regional concerns identified by TSOs beforehand. There was considered a limited lignite availability in Poland. This limited lignite availability, it is confined more or less to 1 out of 3 lignite power plants, so around a gigawatt. Gigawatt lignite power plant in Poland had a limited lignite availability. The other two, for these two, this limited availability is not so structural. Concerning Ukraine and Moldovan system, they were modeled as an integrated part of the European power system, which means we enable transit flows if they are needed through these zones, but consumption and generation is not modeled explicitly in the Ukrainian and Moldovan system itself, simply to the fact that uncertainties are too large for this. But expert qualitative expectations are included in the report by the responsible people at the Ukrainian and Moldovan TSOs. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here we have a slide comparing the trends in the input data as compared to past winter, and also looking at a certain aspect. So basically, we're looking at demand here. This is the survey I mentioned on the first slide. So the peak demand was requested, and also the total consumption for the season that we look at. So for these November till end of March, and TSOs were asked if the demand submitted for the reference scenario, how it relates to with respect to the five-year historical statistics. So where it's green, it's more or less the same, similar to the past 5 years. Where it's yellow, it's a little bit higher. And based on the outcomes, the energy saving scenario was constructed for the single zones. In the middle, we see the generation capacity and how it increases or decreases for the certain categories overall. So we see thermal decommissioning, and we see a build out of solar and wind and also some other non-race capacity, as well as hydro and other renewable energy sources. So overall, we can say that the race capacity is increasing. What we also see is the planned outage schedule, which is more favorable this winter as it was seen for the study in last winter. Next slide, please. Here we see a little bit more in detail, starting with France on the lower left side. The planned outages for French nuclear is more favorable all in all as compared to last winter, which leads also to a more favorable planned outage schedule on the pan-European scale, since France makes up a substantial part of it. So this is all more favorable. And the hydro storage level, as projected in November, they also seem to be better than the winter before. So where it's brown, the change is between -5 and +5, and we see a 5% lower storage level in some of the Scandinavians and in the southeast of Europe, while for the Central Europe and the southern Scandinavian, we see a more than 5% increase in the hydro storage level, as identified for the input data. In the next slide, when we look at the results, so can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Next slide. When we look at the results, this positive input data trend is confirmed by the results. So as already said, so the RES expansion and the favorable planned maintenance schedules and the more or less stagnant demand lead to these all in all favorable adequacy results. And this is why the color blue, dark blue, dominates this slide. However, we do see some risks. We see some risks in rather remote systems at first. For example, Malta and Cyprus. But by performing an analysis including the non-market resources, we can see that, for example, in Malta, this risk is mitigated, which is also the case for Ireland. We do see traces of risks in Finland, which suggests a tight supply margin in Finland. Mostly these kind of traces of risks are the result of a combination of weather plus forced outage, unfavorable forced outage, and last but not least, if we look to the seasonal to the weekly distribution of the risk, which is depicted at the lower right, we can see that Belgium and France in week 3, Belgium and France and the UK, they have the same temporal distribution of a risk. So that's why we talk about the regional risk here, which can also be seen in the left slide. It's small, but it is not inexistent, and it's a little discrepancy, this result, with regards to the RTE assessment. And the difference here is that RTE assessment, so the French TSO, in its national assessment, they use the flow-based market coupling modeling, while the seasonal outlook uses net transfer capacity, which is a bit more conservative in this respect. And flow-based market coupling is considered to allocate the scarce energy more effectively to zones where it's needed. That would be the first result slide. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. In addition to the reference scenario, as I already said, we looked at an energy saving scenario. And all in all, the energy saving scenario looks similar to the reference scenario. The results look similar to the reference scenario. However, in overall, the risks would be mitigated at least by half with energy saving scenario. So the color stays the same, but the dots become smaller, all in all. Especially Ireland becomes smaller, and the regional risk somehow stays for France, Belgium, and UK, but except for Belgium, where it disappears. But for France and UK, there is a small potential to address this regional risk by energy saving. And if we go to the next slide, please. So the next slide shows that shows the critical gas volume analysis. On the left, there is the winter outlook 2022-23 past winter with the outcome of the critical gas volume analysis. And then this year, we depict the reference scenario and the energy saving scenario. And as we can see, so maybe first, because I don't know how familiar everybody is with critical gas volume analysis, the critical gas volume analysis is the critical gas volume needed for a harsh winter in order to maintain power system adequacy. So this is the gas consumption by the power system in order to maintain adequacy. This is the CGV line here. And we see red dots. These are statistical dots. These are historic gas consumption as observed and measured in the corresponding years until here 2018-19, for example. And what we observe is that the CGV for this winter decreases by 10% compared with the previous winter. So we need less gas for the power system adequacy. Why we need less gas? Because we have a better nuclear availability, and we have all in all more favorable conditions as compared to last winter, which is why we need less gas power, less gas and less electricity produced using gas. And if energy savings targets would be reintroduced and would be reached, then this critical gas volume would be reduced by another 10%. And since the critical gas volume refers to a harsh winter, favorable conditions this winter would of course reduce the gas need further. And all and in general, the thermal decommissioning is more than compensating by the RES expansion and by the reduced plant outages, because of course it's like a balance. It's like a balance game with last year. So you can say, okay, maybe demand increased a little bit, or maybe demand is more or less back to normal, and we see thermal decommissioning. But on the other hand, we see RES expansion and we see a reduced plant outages. So the balance here goes to in direction to more favorable conditions. And I think that's it actually for the moment, if I'm not mistaken. Can we see the next? Okay, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Simon. Indeed, this was the last slide, and I see already quite a few questions coming up on the Slido. So just a reminder for everyone, if you have any questions, please go ahead and raise your questions. Or if you would like to hear answers to certain questions, you can also upvote those questions, and we will try to tackle those most upvoted questions first. And now, just after we spoke about the critical gas volumes for power system needs, it's a very nice transition actually to take a look at the prospects, what is expected actually in the gas power system for the coming winter. So Casper, can you maybe try to speak and just let's check if he can actually hear you.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, great to have you here. Thank you, Casper, then for joining. So I leave the floor to you then, okay?
Thank you very much, Lucas, for the invitation. Today I have a privilege to present in front of all attendants winter supply outlook with summer 2024 overview, and I will at the very end say a few words about winter supply review. Let's go to the next slide. So we will start from the assumptions, and I think it's crucial to be on the same page in terms of understanding what things do we assume and how those things are then translated into modeling that we perform for our winter assessment. Lucas already mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation, what is the purpose of outlooks? And I would say in very simple words, normally outlooks supposed to answer a question, and from, I would say, ENTSOG outlooks, whether demand under given assumptions of supply and demand, whether this demand can be satisfied over the full period. Normally, we were asking additional questions, whether it was summer or winter outlook, meaning if during summer we have enough capacity and supply to not only satisfy demand, but as well store gas for the winter that will follow the summer. During the winter, then outlook, we additionally are asking ourselves a question whether under given assumptions we can satisfy demand, and if we have enough gas in storages to tackle all different scenarios or course of events. And here we are talking about disruption, about unavailability of some supplies, and as well strong winter. So I will take you through all the assumptions, because then it is crucial to understand the results and what actually results means. So in ENTSOG, we are having only two seasons over the year, winter and summer. Winter starts for us from 1st of October and ends together with end of the heating season at the end of March. Then we are having summer that starts from April and then until we will reach October 1st. At the beginning of this winter season, when we started our simulation, the storage level was 96%. So storages were very well filled over the Europe. Today we have middle of November, and I'm really happy to say that we still have around 100% of the gas storage filled. So it is very comfortable situation, but we all need to understand and remember always that storages in Europe can cover only roughly around 1/3 of winter demand. It is not that when storages are filled, we can just relax and do not care anymore about winter because it will be fine. It can. Gas stock levels are very important. They're strategic for the winter preparedness, but then they are not solving everything alone. We collect data from our TSOs, and regarding infrastructure, we collected TSOs capacities, and we ask in case of the normal, I would say, situation about the firming capacities, and for the scenario when there would be no gas from Russia at all coming to European system, we are asking as well about enhanced capacity, something that's supposed to address a question what Europe can do in short term or react additionally on top of what is normally offered to the market if there would be no Russian gas at all, and there would be more need to use infrastructure in the other way than normally. So not from west to east, but other way around. Those enhanced capacities were something that we continue doing from 2 years already, when before war situation looked very bad, when storage levels were around 76% at the beginning of winter. And the question was whether we would be able to transfer LNG from Western countries to the rest of the Europe. And at that moment, we were not having additional FSRUs, so floating regasification units in Germany, in Finland. So those things happened over the year and now changed the picture. So I would say with along those 2 years, it's changed. We are simulating different simulation periods. So not only winter, but as I mentioned at the very beginning, summer as well. So we are not thinking only about how this season will end, but we are thinking already with the perspective of coming summer, whether it is possible to store enough gas in storages for the following winter. So now we have this full year overview. Regarding supplies, we developed different than usually scenarios. So we have some of them as we were doing, reference LNG supply, for example, when we base on the historical high supplies to Europe, we are taking those 30 days of the highest supply to Europe and then extrapolating it over the full year, assuming that if that was possible for 30 years, it would be 30 days, sorry, it would be possible to use it as a valid reference point of the LNG supply. We have two more scenarios. One that was already in the previous winter outlook, when we are trying to then check how much is set as a limit by European infrastructure. So we now have those more FSRUs, and together with all interconnections, pipelines across the Europe, we can check what is setting the limit of using that infrastructure, because it can happen that you have LNG terminal that is having certain capacity, but because of the limitation of network, it cannot be used together with all other FSRUs in the region, for example. So this is something that we check under high LNG supplies scenario. Then we set it kind of like unlimited, and then we are checking if infrastructure is setting the limit or not. A new one is low LNG supply. So something that's supposed to answer multiple different questions that we are receiving from stakeholders. Sometimes the question is, what if part of the global LNG would not be available for the Europe? What if there would be, because of strikes, because of some other actions, because if somebody would like to pay more than Europe, for example. Sometimes it can, I would say, it partially can answer a question as well, what if there would be no Russian LNG coming to Europe? Because we don't have too much pipeline gas anymore, but still some Russian LNG is coming to Europe. So it's supposed to answer multiple scenarios, and then it's flat average of the last 5-year deliveries of LNG to Europe. It is, I would say, then in this scenario, we have much less LNG available for Europe. Regarding Russia, it's relatively easy to follow because we already had that in the past. So we have one scenario reference that's supposed to replicate situation as of today. So still some Russian gas coming to Europe through Ukraine and through Turk Stream. and in another one with full Russia disruption. But in this specific case, we still have a little bit of Russian gas coming to Serbia because of the long-term contract that they've signed, but nothing else is coming to Europe. And that's, I would say, we are checking where we are in those terms. If we can go to another slide, it will be another set of assumptions, but only few more, and they are crucial as well to then properly understand results. So we have reference winter, and this is those demand values we are asking our TSOs. We are asking them what are your expectations for the coming season in terms of demand, and then they are providing us those figures reflecting very local and very specific country per country situation. They should take into account situation in electricity consumption of natural gas and every other, I would say, sectors as well. They have their best knowledge to assess, to provide this estimation. And then we have as well something that is named cold winter, and cold winter supposed to refer to the highest demand observed since 2009 and 10 situation, a year when demand was very high, there was very strong winter, and we are trying to investigate what if that will happen. Then additionally, we have this cold winter demand situation with already applied demand response at the level of 15%, something referred to the regulation that is now valid. And we are checking if that alone is solving some problems or it's not enough and some other actions need to be taken or measures. Regarding demand, of course, we are checking high demand situation, peak day, and 2 equal spell. I will talk a little bit about the results in context of assumption when this part will come. But I think it's worth to understand what kind of demand is expected by our TSOs. And this is what we actually have in the winter outlook. So what we got from our TSOs is the middle bar on the chart that you see on the right side of the slide. And this is 8% lower, this demand on average, than those 5-year demand average covering years before war started, before it happened, aiming exactly on the same period that demand response regulation is referring to. So here we are talking about the 8% difference already in regard to what is defined as a potential demand response in the regulation. And to give you an idea where we are in terms of demand that we collected from our TSOs and we use in our reference cases, demand that we consider during cold winter is 25% lower. So reference winter is 25% lower than cold winter on average. So we see that 3 quarters is something that our TSOs expect now versus this like full-fledged cold winter demand from 2009 and 10. This is to give you an idea, and I think it might be useful as well when we would be talking about peak situation, because here it's 25% difference, but when we are talking about peak situation, that difference is much smaller and much smaller, and then it will have impact on the results itself. And the last thing regarding, maybe not the last, but storage target at the end of winter, this is another innovation that we have. We not only check if it's possible to satisfy winter demand and end it with 30% at the end of March, because that basically was meaning if you have around 30% at the end of March, it means that in January and February, those high demand months, you have still quite significant gas volume stored in storages, and that level allows to quite efficiently still withdraw the gas from storages, because as you deplete storages, withdraw capacity decrease as well. Then this time we're not only checking if it's possible, but we are checking then what are theoretical ambitions, what the system could allow under given assumptions in the demand and supply area. So I think it's worth to investigate that, because last summer started with 55% of the gas in storages on average. So it was quite easy to fill storages during summer even if gas was expensive or many things were happening, it was relatively not that hard task to then fill those storages if we started summer with 55%. Then we are checking what is theoretically possible. And then we do this full year simulation when we are checking if we want to satisfy demand over the full year, survive winter, and then store in summer, and then reach 90%, what is comfortable level that we should aim for, maybe from the perspective of infrastructure. Yes, and now the last one to maybe understand at the end how result how our model runs. So in our model, countries cooperate up to the technical limitations. So cooperate to share the risk to avoid risk of demand curtailment, and if that is not possible, we are checking if countries through infrastructure can help themselves. We are not saying it will look like that, but then we are checking if infrastructure allows for that. And in our simulation results, it is then showed in a way that countries share the similar risk of demand curtailment, and that is a sign of cooperation. Because of that, we can as well identify potential bottlenecks. And then countries optimize in optimal way, use storages. So we inject more or less gradually at the same tempo if possible, and optimize the usage of infrastructure, import infrastructure. So also through LNG terminals. I know that this explanation took quite a lot, but I think then the result part would be much faster because it would be really quite easy to understand them. So let's go to another slide. And don't be afraid, it's a huge matrix with many numbers. That's extract from all simulations that we've done, showing basically results of combination of those different scenarios about the LNG supply, about the storage targets, about whether still there is gas coming from Russia or not. And what we see at the first glance is if LNG would be not, I would say, delivered to Europe as probably was or last winter, there is no risk in either of demand curtailment during normal year, during the reference winter, and it is possible to finish winter not only with 30% at the end, but we can aim higher. So if there would be still some Russian gas coming to Europe, we would be talking about 56%. If there is no Russian gas at all, we would still be talking about 40-something, 47%. So it is quite good and comfortable level. In terms of cold winter, situation is absolutely different. And then we already see that some measures are needed. And first measure that we investigated is this minus 15% demand response that you can see at the bottom of the table. So I will focus on that because here it's the cold winter when the first measure, the one defined in the regulation, would be applied. And in this case, we see that that alone improves situation quite a lot because then we are no longer talking about risk of demand curtailment. And in terms of storages, additional effort is needed, of course, but then it is possible to satisfy demand and still, in many cases, end winter with reasonable storage level on average, at least. There is one new thing that we included this time. For the first time in our outlook, we are trying to replicate or show how strategic storages are defined per country. Something totally new. We never done it before. That's our first shot and first attempt. But here we are assuming that those strategic storages per country are not used in our model because country per country rules how to use it, when to use it, under which circumstances are very country specific. Sometimes it's limited by decision of parliament, decision of regulator, decision of ministry. Sometimes it's limited because of the time of the year. So some months it cannot be used. In some countries, it can be used to help others. In some other countries, it's only for its own customers. So it's huge variety, and that information available on the internet. I think that you can check how in specific country it looks like. But then we say 10% and 10% of the working gas volume of storages is, at least for now, in our simulation, represents strategic storages. But it means usage of it will only improve the situation. If we can go to the next slide, it would be conclusions of I would say findings. Maybe not yet, sorry. So peak the ENTSO-E cold spell. Here, peak situation looks, at the first glance, it looks not that good, right? But as I mentioned, there are some things that we are not doing in our modeling, and there are some automatic measures that would be solving this situation up to big extent. So first thing is 15% demand response over 1 day. This is something that would mitigate most of the risk immediately. Another thing is that what we not simulate here is the price response. So when there is a peak demand situation, gas prices are very high, and whoever can, that's basically another demand response, are not using gas or switching to something else. So most of the things can be addressed by that. We see that most of the Europe can cooperate through infrastructure. There are still some bottlenecks between southern Eastern Europe and the rest of Europe and the Baltic states, but observing last year's situation improved quite significantly. Those things are applicable as well to ECODSPEL as well. So let's go maybe then to the conclusion slide, to the next one. And after conclusion, I will present one more slide with Baltic connector disruption, something that happened 2 days before we decided to publish. So I will just briefly explain what we've done. And there would be one more slide about winter review, but I will not dig into details, but I will just invite you to read the document. But starting from conclusions from our winter outlook is that cooperation and infrastructure that we already have allows in many cases to mitigate dependence from Russia and act if something will happen. So thanks to new FSRU terminals, optimized capacities, and many things that can actually be done, there is a risk to reduce dependence on Russia and efficiently use more LNG that would come to Europe, and thanks to that, fill storages over the summer period as well. There are actions that we advertise, which is demand response, alternative supplies, enhanced capacities, and investment. If there are still some running, they should be done. All those things can only improve the situation, but in some cases might be needed, like cold winter. Preparedness, meaning that to reach 90% and satisfying demand over the winter, it is possible to do it, but what is coming from our simulation is that this 45% at the end of winter period would be something giving comfort. So it would give a comfort then to fill storages over the summer. So it should be either around that level or more LNG than in 2022. Summer should be delivered to Europe, and that's what happened already in summer 2023. So we can relate to this. We have two conclusions not derived from the simulations, but based on the observation, is that if Europe stored and packed all its storages fully, it would be wise to reach for other measures like storing gas in Ukraine, if that's possible, and if market participants are willing to do it. That's recommendation that we communicate here. And as well, we've seen in specific combination of situation, Southern Eastern Europe is having a limitation in terms of infrastructure. But then if there is a possibility to transit some gas through Ukraine between member states, so for example, between Slovakia and Romania, for example, it will only help. So we as well advertise it if it's possible. Let's go then to those two quick slides at the very end, meaning Baltic connector disruption. This happened 1 week before we published reports, but 2 days before report publication, there was the public information that this disruption will take at least 5 or 6 months. So until April, would be not having this pipeline anymore. We selected few cases of simulation, we performed them, and what we've seen from perspective of results is basically what is communicated by Finnish and Estonian state, meaning that, okay, lack of this pipeline limits possibility to cooperate, but at the same time, it not pose a significant risk of demand curtailment in the region. Finland still has its LNG FSRU floating unit that can access, and Baltic states are connected through Poland to the rest of the European market. There is a huge storage in Latvia, but sometimes this cooperation is not possible. So Baltic states cannot benefit from LNG terminal, or Finland sometimes could not, of course, be able to benefit from storage in Latvia. That's, I would say, to address this one. And then let's go to the very last slide. And here I will just advertise, please read if you would like to compare previous winter with the winter before war, how that situation evolved. We have, and some things you already know, we have much less Russian gas, much more LNG, and demand decreased. So I will leave you with those 3 bullets. I hope now you are curious about what we have else in the document and you are feeling encouraged to jump into it. Thanks a lot, Lucas. So I'm giving the floor back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Casper. Indeed, very insightful presentations and very clear messages. I would suggest that we proceed further on. We have still 10-12 minutes of scheduled time, so we could go straight to the Q&A session. And you probably can see something on the screen. I know that certain questions were already answered by my colleagues in the chat, so you can also take a look through your applications, and some of the answers might be not appearing here. But I would also just add additional remarks here from my side, maybe just to begin, because I saw a question if the presentation could be shared with the attendees. Actually, the presentation will be shared on ENTSO-E's website. Probably not today, though. Just check the website tomorrow, the seasonal outlook page, and you should be able to see there the content of today's presentation, which includes the presentation as well as the recording of this public webinar. So you can rewind and take a look at that once again, recap the explanations if you missed those today. Moving on, I think that it would be so this was the first question, which I see it's most upvoted here on the screen now. And it would be fair, I would assume, also to answer the couple of other most upvoted questions until we proceed on with more focused questions. So since I have this question on the critical gas volume analysis, and if you take into account that CHP power plants needs also the gas to produce heat and electricity, Simon, could you maybe answer this question? Since this question is, I see, also answered on the platform more in detail from the technical perspective, but maybe just to summarize for everyone. Please, Simon, if you can.
Yeah, so in general, yes, we have taken that into account. So yeah, CHP power plants, they have to be online for they are heat driven. And in case there was supply issues, they also could have produced more up to, so there's a certain must run given as the heat demand implies, and if there's a shortage of capacity or energy, they can produce up to their capacity. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much, then. A following question as well added here. It's about the fact that a certain amount of gas are being stored in Ukrainian storage facilities. If I'm not mistaken, Casper, you also mentioned a little bit something about this in your presentation. But could you just answer if these amounts were taken into account in your outlook calculations?
They were not. I would say, kept that on the more conservative level due to some uncertainties about the conditions, whether and how it could probably be delivered to Europe. But as I would say, mentioned at the end, we say that those volumes can only improve the situation. So we have, for the first time, we have Moldova in our model included. In Ukraine, so far, our cooperation led us to making a little bit more sense out of the potential exports to Ukraine, assumptions in that area. But in the future editions, and of course, if there would be as well some certainty, we would aim for a better representation of storages. So far, we are not simulating with those volumes.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Casper. Then seems that it could have even more positive factor for the coming winter as well. What I see now on the screen and on my side at least, Yes, so maybe it's quite a generic question. It was raised during the ENTSO-E's presentation if we have performed any other sensitivities for the electricity supply analysis. So, Simon, could you answer this one as well?
No, we haven't. The situation looked much more favorable already when we compared the input data. So there was not a lot of incentive to go for a lot of sensitivities, different sensitivities. This is the one thing. And the second thing is, as I said, we launched this survey concerning the demand the TSO provided for the reference scenario, and the outcomes of this survey kind of pointed to the fact that it would be more, that it would be sensible to perform an energy saving scenario, because the electricity demand seemed to be back on the 5-year statistics more or less. These are the 2 points, and the third point why we didn't do so is that it was not requested by involved stakeholders. So, of course, if it would have been requested, we could have maybe performed another one, but yeah,
all right,
was not the case.
Indeed, it appears that the situation is much more certain this winter than it was last. So I believe that it was quite a natural choice the team had to make. Thank you for the answer. I just realized that I can also just highlight the questions which we are addressing. So I would suggest just to catch this one, which was just a few seconds ago raised. And Casper, could you answer it? So for the ENTSO-G outlook report, it is said that there could be some potential lack of the cooperation in case of the Russian supply disruptions. Can you tell anything on this? And did you even consider this in the report?
Yeah, so I was fast enough to answer that question directly to whoever asked in Slido, but I think it's good as well to be clear, and all other participants can follow. So we have information about long-term contracts of gas supply to Serbia and North Macedonia. And in that specific case, we are not assuming those countries as cooperating in a model to not give a wrong impression that some other countries in Europe, through cooperation, can benefit from Russian gas in case if there would be literally no supply from Russia to Europe. So it is as well to address their demands, meaning here Serbia and North Macedonia, not to force other countries to cooperate more and not distort the picture. So in this specific case, we decided to non-cooperative behavior in case of full Russia disruption scenario for Serbia and North Macedonia, but as well assuming that those two countries will satisfy their own demand. We are not talking specifically about those countries in terms of interpretation of the results. We just assume that in this case, they would still be okay, and to have clearer picture about the rest of the Europe. So that's what that means.
All right, great. Thank you very much then. I see actually time is flying. There are a couple of questions actually left unanswered here, or at least answered maybe in a text format only. We may not be able to spell them all out, but as the time is flying, I would suggest to wrap up already this meeting. And just to say that if your answer is not really addressed now, or you would have any follow-up questions, you can always just reach the contact of ours on ENTSO-E's and ENTSO-G side. I just realized that maybe the email addresses might be missing, so at least I believe, Casper, we could add our contact details into the presentation deck once we publish it, right?
Of course.
Okay,
right.
Great. So if you need really the exact email addresses, just take a look tomorrow once the publication, once the presentations would be published there. And for now, I would really suggest that we would just wrap up this meeting then. And to do this, I think that there is no other better way to do it, just to try to summarize what has been presented. So first point is, of course, that the fact that we have analyzed the adequacy situation in power and gas systems for the coming winter, and the prospects in gas and electricity systems appear to be better than a year ago than it was for winter 2022 2023. However, there still remains, especially under the harsh weather conditions as we discussed today, especially if those could be combined with additional adverse incidents. Gas and electricity source maintain awareness, so they are always aware of what is happening in the power system, because the situation is continuously changing. So we have to keep our hands on the developments of the situation, and in case that would be needed, to take mitigating actions. As well as to continue our cooperation, especially between ENTSO-E and ENTSO-G. We remain in a close proximity, and we continue exchanging information. So with this summary, I would like just to give another slide, just to inform you that we have some additional upcoming events in coming weeks. So if I start from the top to bottom, quite linked to what we discussed today about the adequacy, but not about the coming season, rather speaking about the coming years. In December, we plan to publish European Resource Adequacy Assessment, looking at the adequacy for the coming years. Exact date is yet to be defined. However, just please take a look at our website and follow up our newsletters and wrap-ups. It will be definitely announced as soon as this would become clear. Another interesting event is about offshore network development plans. This is actually anticipated to be published in January 2024. Likewise, just follow the information on our website and newsletters which we release. And in addition to that, this one is quite soon, on the 20th of November. ENTSO-G plans a workshop on T1B 2024 project collection. So the link is also added in the presentation deck, or you could simply Google, and I'm pretty sure you will find more information about this event as well. With that, I would like to finish this webinar. I truly appreciate everyone joining today, everyone raising the questions today, or anyone who simply joined us, listened, and found something very interesting for them in our presentation. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Simon and Casper, for joining today, answering those questions. And also thank you very much, Alex and Gianluca, who worked in the background and also answered the questions in writing on the Slido platform. I truly appreciate your support here today, and I'm very glad to close this webinar with such a good note. So once again, thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice afternoon.
Have a good day, everybody. Yes. Thank you. Goodbye.